Okay, super. So I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Let's see, Morgan, do we have any visitors today?
Looks like only Northwest Access.
Okay.
Everyone else is staff.
Okay, very good. So the consent agenda, we have 3 sets of previous minutes. I saw no policies. Am I correct in that, Lynn? No policies to consider today?
I did not notice that.
There were none noted in the agenda, nor were there any included. I was curious because when we were passing at the district boards, the designation of authority there, that hasn't yet come to the SU board.
That was, you have it in your minutes from August 19th. So this should be second read of that policy.
Okay, so would you like another motion then on that? Okay, so let's do the previous minutes. Any discussion on the 3 sets of previous minutes?
No, I'll move to accept.
Great, all in favor. I'll do it by roll. Polly?
Aye.
Emily? Oh, no, Emily. Okay, Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Okay. No reports to consider, so moving on for the policy. Does someone want to make a motion on the second read of that designation of authority for the superintendent?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, all in favor by roll. Polly?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Okay, so then we have no visitors to recognize today. So we'll move on to the central office updates and start with you, Dominic.
Hi, so I don't have a lot to share, I guess. Pretty much just been trying to keep up with everything and keep things going. But I did want to share that one big struggle that you may or may not be aware of is how difficult it is to get devices right now. We're trying to cover all kids grades K through 12, but the reality is if I were to order 50 Chromebooks today, it'll probably be December or January before we'll get them. The supply lines are in that bad of shape right now. So we've got orders that have been placed in early July that haven't come in yet. We've been trying different vendors. We've ordered some refurbished devices. We're doing what we can. Refurbed a lot of old devices that have been sitting in parts piles. But it's one of the biggest challenges right now.
And Dominic, this is one of the first times where you've needed to supply to so many kids in the younger grades. Is that part of the problem? Because at least I know in Montgomery, historically, it's only been, I think, 5th and up that had the Chromebooks that they would then be allowed to bring home.
Yeah, most schools were doing they were starting at either grade 3 or 4 and up, where they might not take them home, but they at least had their own at school. So that's definitely part of the problem. And then it was, the same for lots of other schools across the country that suddenly turned around and ordered for all of their students too. Couple that with the fact that factories were shut down for a while, and that it's created quite a logjam.
It's kind of the assumption that a lot of schools are one-to-one in this day and age, but it just isn't the case. So when everybody had to go one-to-one, like you said, the logjam. So I can imagine how difficult.
Yep. So we're keeping our eyes open. If we see something that's in stock, we do have the option of canceling the other orders since they haven't actually shipped yet. But so far, haven't seen anything very promising. What we have seen, they've been either refurbished or a year or two old devices selling at twice the going rate.
Mm. Wow. And so how, just in a practical day-to-day for the kids and the learning, and how are teachers kind of accommodating the kids that don't, I mean, am I assuming there are some kids who just do not have a Chromebook then?
There are, it's almost exclusively at the primary grade levels. And we did focus on the kids who are fully remote first. That way the kids who are, going to school 2 days, it's a little easier to work with them without a device than it is the kids who are doing everything from home. So at least those students, my daughter's one of them. It's one of the kids who's, she's going to school and she's getting packets and, different resources and projects, and she made a catapult today. So.
What would happen if you can you find low-end laptops? Are they available at all?
I've tried that as well. The problem is a lot of the low-end laptops are actually the same hardware as Chromebooks. It's just with a different operating system on them. So I was told it's basically the same. That
Okay.
if we want to buy $1,000 plus devices, we can probably get them within a week. But when we've been getting $200 to $300 Chromebooks, it's pretty tough.
I think that one of the things that we're going to be talking about with the leaders is whether or not we want to shift our thinking and do something that's more like a tablet for our younger kids, because we might be able to more readily get the tablets for some of our younger students. And I just want to point out the piece about what we're doing now is really different than the spring, because in the spring we didn't have them in person for any amount of time. So we have the ability to set up the learning on the 2 days that they're with us. So when they're with the teachers, they're much more able to set up what those expectations are for the other at-home learning days for the week. Like Dominic said, the project-based idea of building the catapult is an excellent example of that. Dominic's also pretty modest, and I just want to point out that he's had a heavy load. Last year, I talked to you about the SLDS reporting and things like that, and it wasn't, I don't think he would probably say it was much easier this year, this time around, but he buckled down and he got all of our data in. And I know that there were times where it was slow and frustrating, and he doesn't always share all that good work that he's doing behind the scenes, but he's keeping us on top of all of our reporting requirements to the state as well. We really appreciate that, Dominic.
Thanks. Okay. I think that's all I had to share for tonight.
Okay.
So any more questions?
Okay, thanks, Dominic.
We're
Lynn,
actually going to skip the instruction and learning piece and do a report in October.
Yeah.
So we'll do an update, and I can provide you an update later during my section if you have specific questions about instruction.
Of course.
And learning.
Of course. So Michelle, you're up.
Okay. So student services, we've been really busy having IEP meetings and a lot of paperwork and compliance. But I would like to introduce Nick tonight. He is the school psychologist / social emotional learning coach. And when we were creating his position, we were continuing to work to centralize functions in the supervisory union. We wanted to build systems of supports for all students to reduce our need for contracting outside and to build our own capacity. So we have staff now that we feel that we can offer these services. And so this summer, we tasked Nick with a lot. And he's really helped support already. He's done some pretty amazing things. And so he is now our team leader, working on priority standards and creating some systems to build consistency across the supervisory union. So I've asked him to come and to share a little bit with all of you of the great work that he has done. But I also wanted to say that I wanted to thank him for being really flexible because we're centralizing a lot of the staff. One of the challenges that we are having is finding space at central office, and he has nicely taken a corner in our conference room. So I just wanted to thank him for being flexible on where we put him. So I just wanted to introduce, this is Nick DeVita, and he's going to share a little bit about the work that he has done for us.
Hey everyone, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Perfect.
and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I wish I could meet slowly starting to meet people in person, which has been pretty awesome. So yeah, we've been pretty busy when it comes to the social emotional learning stuff across the district. Over the summer, I was able to get together with all the school counselors a handful of times, which was pretty great. And one of our big tasks was knowing that given the state's mandate, we wanted to try and get screeners and things in place to try and daily check-ins for students. So we've worked on creating daily check-ins for staff that they can share, make copies of their Google Forms that can be done every single day. And we're also going to be talking about trying to do something called Closed Gap, which is an app that other districts in the area are using. And it's a little more geared towards younger students to do some daily check-ins so we can assess how they are. And teachers and counselors and administrators can see, and we can reach out to those students and try to connect with them if they're not feeling too great. We also have come up with a survey that we're going to roll out in a few weeks. It's called 3 Trusted Adults. Some of the teachers have already started piloting it. And it's sort of our way to figure out who is their person. If there's an adult in particular that they feel that they have a connection with, if they need to reach that, if they're having a rough day, we can try our best to connect that student with that adult, so that we have those connections, because we know how important that is now. We also, one of the big things that we worked on and we're finalizing this week, and every staff member in the district has seen it already, is the risk of harm protocol. And that is what to do if a student is at risk of harm to themselves or others. It was very inconsistent across all of the schools. In my previous district, it was call Nick, and it just so happened to be on a day that I had a dentist appointment. So I'd like stop my cleaning and have to walk them through what to do. So we wanted to create a system that was very consistent across all the schools of what to do if a student says that they're going to engage in self-harm or harm to others. It'll be in every single classroom. All the teachers have seen it, and we got a lot of really great feedback on that. So that's being finalized this week to be shared with staff. And then, as Michelle said, we're also working on the SEL proficiencies and standards and curriculums that'll be consistent across all the schools. And we've also worked on, with Tim Trevithick, kind of helping to guide that work, the AP at Enosburg High School, trying to create standards for staff, knowing that not everybody is coming in with a mental health background, and understands that, you know, we know that staff are all coming in with different experiences too. So we're trying to work on teaching them so that this can be something that lasts and something that's not just us checking a box. So we're really working on that as well. We've also come up with some protocols for how to handle counseling, one-on-one, virtual, small group during COVID and the current situations that we're in. And then also just working with some of the SEL coordinators across the state on trying to come up with some culturally competent standards and proficiencies for our students and staff. So we've been busy over the last few months, and we've done most of it through Zoom. So it's nice to get to actually do some of this stuff in person with folks now. Anybody have any questions?
Nick, welcome. I had a question for you. Are you all are doing this across all the schools in the district, including the elementary?
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah.
And do you differentiate? I mean, I'm assuming you do, that you differentiate based on kind of age and kind of you know, that the programs you all might be kind of implementing at the high school level are going to look much different
Very
than
different.
they are going to for kindergartners and first graders.
Yep.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
is the case.
Yep, we're trying to come up with some well, we're in the process. We've actually got them drafted now for some of the check-in surveys to be a little bit more like using emojis for the younger kids, knowing that it's not as word heavy. The app that we're going to be kind of discussing later this week called Close Gap is one that other districts are using, and it's geared specifically towards K-8 right now. And that is it's all like emojis and pictures and stuff, so that and it'll read to the students as well. So yeah, and the screener that we're looking to do, the universal screener that we've been like researching and trying to, that we're thinking about moving forward with is adapted based on age. So a kiddo in 12th grade is not going to get, or a kid in 3rd grade is not getting the same questions as a 12th grader, nor are they getting the same amount of questions as a 12th grader. So yeah, they are being completely adapted based on students' age and also their ability levels, and we're trying to just meet them where they're at.
Great.
I think I want to just add one piece to this. I will echo what Michelle said, that, you know, we hired Nick and he hit the ground running. There's nothing like starting a new job in the middle of a pandemic when you know, the need for the service that you provide is just immense. He's reduced a lot of work in this little bit of time. There had started to be some work that was already being done around the priority standards for social emotional learning. And one of the bits of feedback that we've gotten from staff along the way is, and this has been over the course of a couple of years, is that people recognize when kids are struggling and they see it. The idea of how to explicitly teach some of the skills that kids need in those moments where they're really struggling, that's harder. So what Nick and his team are really working on is trying to identify what are all those skills and dispositions that kids need across multiple age bands, kind of the priorities around social emotional learning. So they're working hard to develop that. And then some of the next steps, this is obviously going to be a multi-year process. Some of the next steps have to do with identifying, okay, if this is the skill and the disposition, how do we explicitly teach this universally to all the kids in the classroom without making an assumption that all kids know how to do this or all kids understand this? How do we universally teach it? And then just like our academic support, we'll eventually be shifting into when kids have received the instruction and they still don't understand it, how do we provide them with some intervention so that we can support it? So Michelle and I have talked a lot, and Jody have talked a lot to you all about our MTSS system, the multi-tiered systems of support, so that, you know, everybody gets the instruction, and those kids that need additional time and support get targeted intervention or intensive targeted intervention. The goal ultimately is to be able to do the same thing around social emotional learning. And I think Nick and his team are building that foundation right now that are going to allow us over the next couple of years to be able to have much more effective systems in place throughout the supervisory union in all of our schools, from the universal classroom level of all students to the kids with the highest needs. And this aligns with the work that Michelle's been doing, and Shirley before her, around building the capacity within our system to be able to better support the social emotional needs of our kids. So Nick's jumped right in and he's doing some really great work. And I love how I'm seeing these foundational steps come together. It makes a lot of sense.
So I have a question. Is the first approach to work more in kind of classroom instruction around these skills, or is it more in developing your support systems, do you think? Like where's the priority, I guess?
So ideally it would be to start with universal. We started with, in the MTSS work, the systems of supports that we've been building over time on the SEL side, like hiring the BCBAs and putting services in schools, doing the RBT trainings for paraeducators to be able to have those systems of supports at the higher tiers. What we had missed was that universal step. So we're kind of
backtracking.
Yeah, we're going into reverse, doing the universal piece and then aligning that with the other layers.
Got
We
it.
needed a Nick to help us get to that universal piece, Polly.
And I think too, the information and data that we'll be able to gather will help kind of drive some of that universal instruction piece, where we can bring this information to EST, the support teams in each of the buildings, and have some real data informed discussions that'll help kind of shape the work that we do at a universal level, and that we can try to merge that with the academics, because they are together, so that we can really kind of marry those two together, and also move forward and get our staff going in the same direction together as well.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Nick, Michelle. That's great. It's really important work. Anything else, Michelle? Or are you good?
I'm all set.
You're good? Okay. So Heather Moore, you're up.
Hi, hello everybody. Yeah, so LEAPS just finished its first week of morning programs at 4 of our sites. Was successful. Our hub programs start on Wednesday. So something really neat with that. This is a really wonderful, we've talked about it before, the partnership between the schools themselves and the LEAPS program, and offering this Wednesday opportunity for some of our youth to be in the buildings, have supervision, get their meals, engage in LEAPS activities, and also have opportunities to do some of their remote learning work as well. So we're creating schedules, that has a little bit of work time, a little bit of enrichment time, lots of great time outside. FNESU, we were the first organization to sign up for one of the hub grants. So we did receive some funds to help support the first month of that. So to buy some supplies, some financial support for some extra work that's going to be going into that. And then the LEAPS After School program itself is going to start on the 21st. We're looking pretty good. We're still looking for some staff members. If anybody wants to volunteer, just put in that plug. But the programs are looking good. We're going to be doing the online work, program offerings, as well as some activity kits for youth and families. We're coming up to starting the second year of the Vermont Youth Project as well. So if you recall, we did a survey with students in Enosburg and Richford, grades 7 through 12. And one of the great things about this survey is it focuses on protective factors, student perception of their environment, and we get the data back. We'll have the data back by late December, early January. So it'll also include some real-time information on social emotional supports with the students. So we'll kind of get a good glimpse of how they've been feeling the past year. So we've got the coalition going with that. We've been meeting. We're going to be working with the leadership team to see how to implement that survey this year, knowing that, we don't have all of our students in person right now. So we're going to be coming up with a plan for that. So yeah, we're pretty excited. That's what I have.
Can I just give a little add-on there? By volunteer, I know what Heather meant was people interested in working in our programs this year.
Yes.
We had some paid positions. Unfortunately, we can't have volunteers during the COVID.
Right. Thank you for that that distinction. That is correct.
I knew what you meant.
Yes. Yes. It's my old plug and it's hard to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's hard.
But we have some wonderful paid positions in our programs, and it's worthwhile. Lots of fun, lots of smiles on students' faces.
All right. Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. Okay. Jamie, you're up.
Hello, everyone. I will start by giving a hiring update. We've had a lot of new hires in our SU this year. We've had a total of 40 new professional staff members across the SU. And we still have several positions left, mostly in the SU. We have a reading specialist, school psychologist, early childhood special educator, special educator, a LEAP site director at Richford High School. Those are all SU paid positions, and we have very few candidates that have applied on School Spring. They're very hard to fill. And we're currently in the process of hiring a facilities director for NMV. And we're also advertising for long-term sub-teachers for a few openings that we'll have, some leaves that we know that are coming. And we have a general advertisement out for substitute teachers, paraeducators, part-time custodians, and after-school program instructors. So we have quite a few openings there. We've hired 7 new support staff, 2 LPN positions that were new this year, a half-time in each of Bakersfield, Berkshire, and Montgomery. And we've hired 2 custodians and 3 paraeducators, but we've had several paras leave, well, more than several. We've lost 25 paraeducators across the SU. We have 22 of them that are not filled at this moment. So we've lost 1 in Bakersfield, 1 in Berkshire, 2 in Montgomery, 6 in Sheldon, 6 in Enosburg, and 9 in Richford. So a lot of openings with the paraeducators.
Jamie, I have a question about the LPNs. Is that, I forget, is that just a year position, or are those looking to the future to be there as well?
The Montgomery and the Bakersfield half-time position in each of those towns are just for this year. Berkshire actually built a half-time LPN into their budget. So that should be there next year.
Gotcha, thanks.
Any other questions on the hiring?
Yeah, Jamie, I'm curious, that's a significant attrition in the para realm, and I'm just curious what's driving it. I mean, it's probably not just one thing, but is this COVID related? Is it folks having a real hard time kind of juggling their own families with kids that aren't full-time in school, or it just?
Yeah, it's both. We had a few that retired, especially with COVID. They decided to retire. We have a couple that are on a leave of absence for a year because they're at home with their own children. We have a few that, a couple that right now are only working, and I didn't even count these in, that are only working like 2 days a week because they're at home with their kids the other 3 days. I'm trying to think. We have a few that left because they just found other jobs that they felt were more stable, because if school shuts down, there's no guarantee that their position is still available, or they'll be paid at least, unless the governor says something again. So yeah, it's a mix of everything.
And I'm just curious, I know at one point before merger, when it was just on the Montgomery board, we were looking at para salaries, kind of comparing them to other schools in the region and other counties even. Do you feel as though salary is hindering being able to hire for these empty positions for the paras? And how are we, I mean, that would be maybe, I don't know, Morgan might know more of the numbers and the breakdown of how our salaries are relative to other districts or SUs.
I mean, I think our salaries are higher than other districts because we pushed to get an increase. We have 3 categories: base, associate's degree, and bachelor's degree, and we raised them all by $1. So, I mean, I think I've heard from people we've hired that our pay is higher.
So we are competitive.
Yeah.
I think we're competitive with the people who are right near us.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've done a comparison much beyond what's right here in Franklin County.
One area that we hadn't been competitive in the past was in healthcare. And now that that's a statewide plan, that field has also been leveled.
Great. Okay. Good. Well, that's good to know.
Any
I
other
do know
questions?
that, oh, I was just gonna say, I do know that the parish shortage is far and wide. And I think, again, it comes down to that uncertainty of, do you get a job that you know you're going to be able to go to, or do you work at a place that could potentially?
Right. Okay, and the next update I have is regarding available leaves for our staff. I sent out a couple letters in July and August notifying all staff of the available leaves that we have. And we have the FMLA leave, and that's usually used if someone is caring for themselves or a family member that's ill, or if they have, like, for the birth of a baby. So we have that leave. And then we have the ADA leave for Americans with disabilities. And that's if they would like to request any accommodations for medical reasons. And they have to have a form filled out by their providing doctor. And it's not guaranteed that we can accommodate them. It depends on their position and the situation. So for example, if somebody requests fully remote due to COVID, it's not a guarantee that we can give that to them, depending on what their position is and if it's needed in the school. And then there's a new leave that's available. It's the Families First Coronavirus Response Leave. And there's two parts to this leave. The first is emergency sick leave. If you have to quarantine or if you have symptoms of COVID, then that's available up to 80 hours, and it's a one-time leave. So up to 80 hours is available for just those two reasons. There's also part of this that's if your children's daycare or school is closed, so this hybrid would count for that. If their school is closed 3 days of the week, they can request this leave, and they get 2/3 of their pay each day for up to 12 weeks. And it doesn't come out of their own leave record, their own accrued time. So those are the new, well, not two are standard leaves we've always had, and one leave that's new.
Jamie, can you talk about when that is expected to sunset at this point?
Yeah, this is expected to expire on December 31st at this point, the Families First Coronavirus, unless it gets extended.
So I asked Jamie to share that information with all of you, to just give you a little of the context of what we're struggling with in terms of hiring and also the kinds of leave that we're going to be navigating. So the issues that we have around staffing shortages are pretty real. And, that continues to be a part of our reopening plan that all of us have worries about, is being able to sustain an adequate level of staffing in order to keep going in person. And so we're anticipating higher than normal rates of absenteeism with our staff because of the restrictions around the virus and when you have to stay home. So all of this kind of plays together in terms of our ability to cover when people are out. So I wanted to make sure you had that accurate picture. Any questions for Jamie on that?
Jamie, can you clarify the leave? I think it was the last one that you highlighted, where you're still getting 2/3 of your pay.
Yes, it's part of the Families First Coronavirus leave. If their children's daycare or their children's school is closed due to COVID, which our schools, the hybrid model fits that, like it's closed 3 days a week for their children. And if they don't have anyone to watch their children, they can request to use this leave, and they get 2/3 of their pay each day for up to 12 weeks. So 60 work days.
And at the same time, though, we Okay, and so the district is bearing the cost, and the district then is also bearing the cost of any substitutes required to fill that person's role.
Yes.
And the state is helping provide is the state helping provide any funds that support these leaves that are part of that COVID?
No, not that I know of, unless we can code some of it to the
Yeah.
COVID relief.
We may be able to get either CRF or ESSER money to cover that, although we don't really know how far the CRF money is going to go.
Right. Right. So that's hefty. That could be potentially hefty.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Jamie?
I think that is it for now.
All right. Okay, so Dawn, you're up. Is Dawn here? She's with us, eh?
She is.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I am working on lots of different things right now. We have a new, our summer feeding program was extended until December 31st, unless funds run out sooner. So right now we are believing that we are going to be running our summer feeding program until December 31st, hoping that funds don't run out sooner. What that means is we can feed any child 18 years of age and younger. So we're in the same mode as what we were all summer long. Things are going pretty good with the kids in the classrooms. It's much easier to feed kids when they're in person than it is when they're remote. But I think we've got a pretty good system worked out for serving the kids in the school. We did take a 1-week break in meal delivery. So last week we had it so that everybody had to pick their meals up at the schools if they wanted them. We are working right now on bus routes to take and do meal delivery to all of anybody who wants it in our communities. On Wednesday morning, we're going to start our meal deliveries going out at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's going to be an early morning for kitchen staff. So it's looking like we're probably going to be doing somewheres. I'm going to guess, I don't have all the numbers in yet, but I'm going to guess we're going to be doing somewhere around 1,000 meals. Some meals that are going to be going out are going to be 3-day-a-week meals. Some meals are going to be 5-day-a-week meals, depending on whether the kids are in person 2 days or not. So that's kind of the gist of what we've got going on with the meals program. This last Saturday, we took and worked with the Abbey and did a food distribution. We distributed a lot of food. We had let me think. I gotta look to make sure I don't want to tell you differently. We had 16 pallets of food that we distributed. We had 800 boxes of dairy. We had 480 gallons of milk, 896 boxes of chicken, and 135 boxes of produce. We were supposed to run that from 9 to 1. We ended up running out of food at noontime. We did start a little early, so we were only out of food for about half an hour because I think we started about 30 minutes early. We really had a really good setup. We had volunteers. And the VTrans, the local state garage, donated the use of one person and the loader to unload those pallets. So that was a great opportunity for us to have them involved. So other than that, I don't know as though I have a whole lot more, other than we're still plugging away trying to get these bus routes figured out for what we've got for meal delivery.
I just want to add on to the Saturday piece. That was an incredible experience. We had principals and teachers and support staff all out there working together with Dawn. Her family was really present there as well, and it was remarkable. I think about the logistics that Dawn has taken on this year from start to finish, and it's the level of detail that she's had to attend to make all of this happen is probably not super visible for everybody else, but I get glimpses of it every time I meet with Dawn, and it's pretty awesome that we have the director and that she's been able to make this happen for kids and families across all of our communities. So good work, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really is remarkable and amazing that we can help support so many families during this really challenging time. Dawn, I had one question. This transition to the summer feeding kind of model, does that expire at some point? I know this was kind of through the USDA that they changed it, so we can now reach more kids, anyone under 18. How long will that go on for?
As of right now, our waiver goes until December 31st if we have the funds. If they run out of funds before that, they will pull the plug on that before that. I really don't foresee that happening because I have a feeling they're going to try to find the funds from somewhere else, because I can't foresee them saying they're going to feed all the kids 18 and under until December 31st and then having to close it down sooner.
Thanks, Dawn. That's excellent. Okay, so moving on to Morgan, you're up with the financial report.
Great. So you have my report in your packet. The auditors are going to be on site tomorrow and possibly Wednesday, and I think that's the only time that we will have them in person this year. So I should be able to update you folks and your local boards at your October round of meetings on how that is going. The financial reports for FY21 are attached. Obviously not a whole lot of information there yet. And then I also included the budget development schedule in your packets. You will get a very, very rough cut of your budget at your October 19th meeting. And then hopefully we're going to finalize that by your December 21st meeting, because we need those figures to be somewhat firm before we finalize the two local budgets. So any questions on that? Okay, so I also in your report tipped you to the food service management contract. So currently in our 5 original FNE towns, we are running the food service program with directly hired staff. Sheldon and the rest of Franklin Northwest had a contract with the Abbey to provide their food service for their kiddos. That contract was brought over in the merger, and for this year we signed a 1-year renewal to that. If we were to continue with that in Sheldon, there's a pretty specific RFP process that we have to go through, and the contract would look significantly different than it does today. All new food service contracts have to be done at on a per plate basis. So they're going to say, no matter how many meals we put out, they're going to charge us X dollars per plate to get those out. That's not how the current contract is written. So as I see it, you've got 3 options for next year, and one would be to rebid that contract just for Sheldon Elementary, and then continue to have that operated under a service contract. You could take over the program at Sheldon Elementary and hire staff and run that similar to the program in our other schools. I think technically you could choose to bid all of the food service for the entire SU out on a food service management contract. It's certainly not something that I'm recommending. And if folks felt strongly that we wanted to go that route, we would want to pull in your legal counsel because the food service employees in your other 5 towns are all unionized, and that switching that to a contracted service comes with some challenges with the collective bargaining. I don't need a motion. I don't necessarily need any guidance tonight, but I wanted to start that conversation and let you guys be thinking about that and what direction you want to take.
Hey, Morgan.
Yep.
Logistically, could we do the program without, is there enough infrastructure at the Shelburne Elementary School so we could take over if we wanted to? Is there a way to cook meals and all that kind of stuff there?
Yes, the kitchen, you own the food service kitchen there. You're really just contracting them to put employees in and do the ordering.
Okay. So when they come, they supply all the employees, all that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's some of the paperwork they do. Dawn would be able to speak better to that than I can, but the infrastructure is already yours or already Sheldon's.
And I think at one point in time, I thought you had concerns about the way, if they were even going to be able to bid it out correctly with the new system. You still have those concerns? I thought that.
So we can bid it out. It takes a kind of a long runway to do it, which is why I'm bringing this to you now. It may have been that that we were too late in the year to get that done on a new contract, and that's why we did a 1-year rollover, which we were allowed to do.
Morgan, I'm of the mind that it makes sense to, I would say, to pull Sheldon in with the rest of the schools in the SU from a kind of efficiency and equity standpoint. But I also, it would be helpful to know how people specifically in Sheldon feel about the Abbey, the food, the program, how it's running there, and how those costs are comparing to our costs in the SU.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the program side, Don and I had great intention pre-COVID of pushing out surveys, not only to Sheldon, but to all the schools, just to do a check-in to see how we were doing. And that would be, it would be broader. It would likely be broader than just food, but the staff and the environment. And that's something that I think we still hope to do, and it's just a matter of finding time. In terms of comparing the costs, I believe that we could look at this year and say, this is, get a rough idea on what it would cost, or what we think it costs to do to put a plate of food in front of a kid. I don't know if we can look at it with last year's numbers yet because of the quick change to COVID and that community feeding model. But, I think we should be able to get close. And then, unlike what the current contract is like, if we do end up bidding out Sheldon, even if it's just to get a look at what that might look like, at that point, they're going to be required to say it's going to cost X dollars for a plate of lunch and X dollars for a plate of breakfast and this much for a snack. So I think we can do a pretty reasonable analysis.
And explain to me why we wouldn't why it's just not a natural progression of, kind of owing to merger that we bring Sheldon, if this contract with the Abbey is running out and now we're obligated to do a more kind of broader bidding process, why would we not just bring them into the fold, because it streamlines things to have all the schools in the SU working with Dawn, and then there is an equity piece to be made. I don't know how widely, how different the meals are that are being provided by the Abbey versus the rest of the schools.
Yeah, and I think we won't know that until we get a survey out on the ground. I think the main reason not to is that they are, a large employer in Sheldon, and they've historically had that contract. I would assume that if we looked at what it costs us to serve kids in the other towns, that you would be able to add Sheldon on without it costing that much more. You would need to hire, move 2 people from payroll from the Abbey to Dawn's budget to run that kitchen. But you're already paying for that through the Abbey. I think we could come up with the number side of that pretty easy. But I do think it's really it's primarily deference to history.
Yeah.
And at a future meeting, Emily may be able to add more to that conversation when she's there next.
Yeah, it would be helpful to hear as a Sheldon representative, how that lands with her, and she obviously knows the pulse of the community much better than any of us do. So the food service, because we run it through the SU, this is an SU board decision as opposed to the NMV board, eh?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I'm happy to bring that, bring the discussion to the NMV board as well. I know that the SU board has certainly taken its lead from the local district boards on topics like this. But I think, I think for tonight, I just really wanted to start that conversation. And next month, Dawn and I can give you a more concrete timeline on what bidding it out would look like. And then if we decide not to bid it out, I think that's easy to see what that's going to look like. Excuse me. We would have the the Abbey contract through the end of this school year, and then look at staffing up over the summer.
And just to clarify, Morgan, obviously, if it transfers over to the SU, we're not obligated to bid on it as the SU, right? This would be
if you decide to pull it in-house, you have no obligation to bid it. You only would have obligation to bid it if you're considering a contract.
And how many bids would we have to seek in addition to the Abbey?
You would have to advertise, and the sense that I get up here is that you would just get the Abbey. There might be one other contractor, but from what I've heard in discussions with business managers around the state is that, statewide, there are really only 2, maybe 3 players, and they're not tending to see all of them on any one bid.
Okay. So as long as it's kind of just you have to put the bid out, but if we might not even have another person or another entity other than the Abbey because of the geography, and who else would want to provide that service all the way up here?
Right.
Okay.
And I don't know what the Abbey's business model is. It may not be worth it for them to have only one town in an SU, and so you could put this out to bid and get no bids.
Okay.
As well.
Do you know whether they have an interest in continuing the arrangement?
I have not had the conversation with them. I would assume that they would bid on the elementary school that's in their hometown.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll punt that to the next meeting then, with some of
Okay.
that
Yep.
kind of detail gathering.
Yep,
And then
that
we
sounds
can,
good.
and it would be good, I guess, we could also have it on the agenda for NMB and maybe get Miranda and Emily to weigh in from the Sheldon perspective.
Okay, that sounds good. The only other item that I am bringing to you is similarly, the contract with Terracel Transit will expire at the end of this year. You've got the option to put it out to bid or to roll it over for another year at an increase no greater than the NEAP, which is an inflation figure that hovers in the high 2 to low 3% amount each year. If your desire is to bid that out, I would just want to sort of give Terracel an early tip that that's going to happen. I do not know if they're interested in rolling it over for that amount. We've done that probably for 6 years now, and I will have to double check and make sure. There's another clause in the bid law that, once you've rolled it over enough that I think it's 30% higher than the original contract, they'll force you to bid that out at that point again. I don't think we're there, but we're probably going to start hitting that ceiling in the next couple of years. And similar to the discussion about the Abbey, last time we bid transportation out, they were the only bidder. There certainly are more players in the state and in the region, and you might get more interest now, but historically we haven't seen a whole lot of people excited about providing school bus services.
Any thoughts, folks, on that? I mean, I'm of the mind that we have enough really complicated things going on right now that staying the course with the busing contractor that we have, at least for the next year, as long as they're amenable to it, that makes sense to me, rather than trying to put a bid out, because I remember the last time we had no one else interested, and at least we've got folks willing to come up these back roads in Montgomery to get our kids. It's not for the faint of heart.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. If we can roll it over, let's try to roll it over one more time before we can't.
I would concur. Like normally we like to kind of bid for the competition, but in this situation, I think it's slim picking. So I feel good.
Okay. So what I will do is I will reach out to them and let them know. We won't have the NEAP until December, and so we may not have a final answer to then, and I'll just plan on, assuming they're willing, I'll plan on bringing a contract to you for approval either in December or January.
Great. Sounds good, Morgan.
And then I saw on my agenda the Communications Union District, but that was news to me that was on my agenda. So I know that that one of the board members had reached out to me, and I think others had some conversation with them looking for some representation from the school community. I know Mary at an earlier meeting expressed interest in serving in that role, and I think Dominic since then has been pulled in to wear a Berkshire hat on that board. I don't know, Lynn, maybe you know if we need any sort of formal motion. Kind of feel like we don't, and just kind of a heads up that we've got Dominic and Mary now on that board representing us is maybe enough.
Maybe just that reflected in the notes would be enough. I haven't seen anything formal that would make me think we're required to make any sort of board motion.
And
No, I don't think so. I think we just appoint.
Sorry, Polly.
I said, I don't think you need a motion. You just kind of appoint and say, Mary Niles is our representative.
And I don't know if it's a SU seat that they have on there, or if it was just we've got board seats and we're hoping to get people from the school filling those out.
So they communicated to me, sorry, maybe you could speak to it. They communicated to me that they wanted somebody specifically from the SU.
Okay.
But I also think that they would take anybody who's interested as well.
So yeah, then maybe somebody nominating Mary to be on that board would make sense.
And
Okay.
I did talk to Sean. We played email tag for a good bit there, and then finally connected over phone just today in advance of the meeting. And I'm certainly happy to help in that capacity. I told him I'm a little stretched thin, but when I get on the other side of my farming season, I have a little more spaciousness, and I'm happy to kind of help where it's useful. And he mentioned Dominic from, as the Berkshire person. So I think that could be a good collaboration there. And a couple things I think that were interesting to note is that he said that the data that the SU kind of accumulated around kind of with our families and access to internet and who has it and who doesn't and who's struggling and such was really helpful for them. They used a lot of that data when they testified last week before the Senate Finance Committee. So they're definitely kind of, full steam ahead. It's going to be certainly a marathon here to kind of get where we would ideally like to see with broadband in our underserved kind of region. But so, and I think it's just, they just kind of, I get the sense from him, it would be helpful for him to understand from the SU, what our needs are from the kind of educational perspective. And yeah, so, I can keep everyone abreast of that. He also mentioned that he might like to, if we are comfortable, to welcome him to maybe the next meeting in October, that he could give kind of an overview, and I think then would be able to kind of clarify what their interests are in having, SU involvement and what that might look like if people were interested to have him attend next month's meeting.
Well, Mary, the other end of farming season may be 10 hours from now where you live.
I was, you should have seen me like a crazy lady out there covering and harvesting today. It was frantic. So yes, it's coming quickly.
So I can make a motion to appoint Mary, but while I'm saying that, I feel, so Dominic, you're a representative on the CUD for Berkshire, right? As a resident?
Yeah, I do. I live in Berkshire.
Okay, but I was just going to say, I feel as an SU board member, I feel comfortable with you being able to chime in about SU needs. So I know it's kind of like you're as a resident, but you're also an SU employee, one specifically who has great knowledge of our needs for technology. So Mary, I motion to appoint Mary to this CUD, but I just want to put it on the record that I feel comfortable with Dominic chiming in as well.
Okay, and that's a formal motion there, eh, Polly? So I guess we'll take a roll. So Kevin?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Polly?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. And Dominic, I absolutely agree with Polly. I mean, I think you have such tremendous kind of expertise in this arena and insights that, both as a representative of your town, but also for the SU, that would be great. So we could kind of tag team on that stuff.
Sounds good.
Okay, awesome.
That's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. And I want to apologize, Robin. I I missed you in the first round. So my apologies. If you want to have stuff to share, this would be a good window now.
Before she shares, I want to share Robin's, she actually got a promotion. So Robin is now I have to look it up, Robin, because I don't remember what we called it. Our emergency operations coordinator. So she has been right beside me for the entire time that I've been superintendent, helping along the way with all the work we've done on Alice and all of the other emergency response teams. And she's on top of it. So given everything that's been on my plate, she got a promotion a few weeks ago. And I would like her to spend some time when we're meeting with you guys, giving you some updates along the way. So here's your first one. Surprise, she found out about this about 5 minutes ago in a text.
That's all right. This is an easy one. Just so you all know, all of our FNESU staff have engaged in an online training that took approximately 30 minutes. We had to do a little change in what we typically do for our tactical stuff with staff this year with the COVID restrictions that we have. So that part has been on hold this year. So we've been really relying on the instructional part from the Alice Training Institute. With that being said, there's 4 of us across the supervisory union, Lynn, myself, Lenny Badeau, the Berkshire principal, and Robert Fair, the dean of students at Richford Junior Senior High School, that are instructors. So the 4 of us are having to engage in a recertification for that this year. We also work with our local law enforcement partners. We each have a law enforcement partner that we have with us when we do the training within each of the individual schools. As of last Thursday, about 90% of our FNESU staff had completed the online training. So I've been working with the administrators in each building to kind of get that other 10%. We're also trying to catch the new staff as they're hired so that they can participate in the training as well, because we do feel that the safety component is important, that if we needed to respond in a way, we want to make sure that our staff have the knowledge of what needs to be done. Our new teachers at New Teacher Orientation that happened in the middle of August, in addition to this online training, also listened to a 45-minute screencast that I created that was really specific to our supervisory union. So while I gave a lot of background information to kind of get them to understand the purpose of Alice, it really was sort of also targeted towards our SU needs. And lastly, there are some modified lockdown and evacuation drills and expectations that each of our schools will be participating this year due to the COVID restrictions. So historically, schools have had to do like 5 evacuations a year. This year it looks different. So if you hear in the community, you know, the kids are not practicing the fire drills at the frequency that they have in the past, that is accurate. The one thing to know is that all students need to participate in a fire drill within the first 30 days of school, and schools should be engaging in that for both cohorts. So obviously our schools are operating with cohort A and B. So there should be 2 fire drills happening within each school within the first month of school. Our Alice lockdown drills will look a lot different this year. They're going to be more discussion based with students versus having students practicing the evacuations and the enhanced lockdowns, just because obviously that requires students to be fairly close, and with the social distancing requirements, it's really best that that be done through discussions this year. So that'll be a little different. We'll be working with our principals to discuss what that can look like within their buildings at the different grade levels. But the one thing that will continue to happen is there will be a fire drill that has historically looked like it has, and I did inquire at the state level around it being okay. We're going to encourage that students remain, you know, distant from one another as they're evacuating, that it's not hurry up and get out like we want to be out within 3 minutes. It's more get out safely and let's kind of keep the social distancing in place as much as we can. But those will not be happening at the frequency that they've been happening historically. And again, there'll be some discussions that'll be happening with students in the classroom to kind of honor that requirement.
Robin is on top of it, and she's going to make sure that we all stay on top of it as well. Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Robin.
Oh, Lynn forgot to also tell you that she promoted me to Title IX coordinator. So if anybody needs to speak with that person, it's me, but don't send them for a while because I have a lot of learning to do on that end. Huge learning curve for me. I'm not as well versed as I am with safety, but I'll get there by the end of the year.
Double promotion. I was going to save that for next month, Robin.
Nice.
That just jogged my memory, actually. You said Title IX. So I got something about us having to update the policy around Title IX. Did you get that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
We'll be seeing that soon.
Yeah.
It's one of those mile deep things. We've got some work to do.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that having never done it, I didn't realize the drastic changes that were coming. I was just like, oh, this is cool. But everybody that's done it for a long time are realizing that there's some different stuff. So again, that kind of speaks to the learning curve that I have. But I've already attended an 8-hour training, so I feel like I left that day feeling like I thought special ed was challenging. This was more difficult. So anyway, look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Robin. Lynn, you're up.
Okay. So Morgan, I don't need it yet, but I will need to share my screen at some point here. So I want to start with just acknowledging the continuous improvement plan. I don't have that ready for you today. I don't have all members of my team available to me right now. And I really think that's important before we finalize our continuous improvement plan. So I'm going to push that to October, and we will present on that at the October meeting. Under teacher negotiations, I just wanted to inform you that I did get a letter from the Cold Hollow Education Association president, Todd Marlowe, who notified us that the teachers are interested in opening collective bargaining, which we anticipated. We did a 1-year agreement with them last year. So there was some question about timing and when to start that negotiation. I think that I have a weekly meeting with Todd in the age of COVID. And that is one of the things that he's hoping we could talk about, is just thinking around, I think that the union may be hoping that we would negotiate later than normal. You know, that we typically try to take that on in the fall because of budgeting. And I think that the union may hope that we push that back a little bit. So I'll need some guidance from the board. I don't know if you want to take that into consideration tonight, or if you want me to come back in October for that conversation.
Lynn, what's the reasoning for Todd and the teachers wanting to push it beyond our normal time?
The financial outlook is trying to figure out where we actually are. We keep having that number that keeps shifting, right? Like, what is the actual shortfall in the education fund? And I think that's going to be pretty important information for you all as board members. And I think that they're keenly aware that this is going to be a challenging couple of years for us in education as we deal with the ramifications of COVID. I mean, you've already, just from hearing the director's reports, you've seen some of the effects that are hitting us, and there are a lot more kind of behind the scenes that we haven't necessarily presented yet. So I think that they're really aware of that, Mary, and they're hoping that if we push it back a little, there'll be more information available about where we actually are.
And maybe Morgan could chime in here as our numbers money guy. Morgan, does that resonate? Does that sound like we'll get to a point where it's a little clearer from the state what this shortfall is in revenue and how that's going to affect us as we start to craft the budgets?
I think I might be able to answer that question after we get a vaccine.
Oy.
A lot of uncertainty for sure.
They will probably be able to hone in a little bit better their estimates for the rooms and meals tax and things like that. But The reality is that things are going to be hard to predict and changing until COVID is a thing of the past.
So do you think then, given that, and that there's still value in waiting a bit and pushing back from our normal kind of timeline of the negotiation process?
Well, I guess I think the negotiation process goes better when both partners are willing and wanting to be there. So if we force it, I think it will just cause them to drag their feet and will end up, in terms of time frame, in the same place.
Yeah.
And possibly with both sides starting the real work much more frustrated with each other.
The other thing is, I mean, they'll have a better idea what's going on, but we'll also have a better idea what's going on later too. So I guess the biggest thing would be if we went so late that I don't know when they're thinking, but I don't want to put a budget out there and be in trouble with a budget that's not reality. So I don't want to get out there so late that happens. But I also think later is probably better.
So that being said, Rick, that means you would, if you wanted to inform, you want to have real numbers in your budget, what that means is we have a target end date for early January for wrapping up negotiations, mid-January, right, Morgan?
Yeah, the bigger concern for me would be the April 15th deadline to give out contracts and announce a RIF, because the reality is, even with some of these big moves that we've made on the salary schedule, the overall new money is in a pretty predictable and pretty narrow range in terms of budgeting. The bigger issue in my mind is that you want some clarity both in terms of the collective bargaining agreement, but also in terms of the financial outlook before you're handing out contracts, because you want to be cutting people if you see a world of hurt coming down the pike.
So I think I can bring this back in October. We don't have to make any decisions tonight. But I kind of wanted to hear your thinking. If the board was in a full steam ahead mode, I wanted to hear that in advance of my conversation with Todd. But I'm not really sensing that. I'm sensing it's okay to wait a month and come back to you. Okay.
Okay, with wait and come back.
Just adding that to my designee. Okay. In terms of personnel, I sent you a request from a teacher. You have seen her requests before. You get one each year. Claudia Woodward has made a request. Just getting to it now on my computer. She's made a request for additional days in her contract. How she's written it, I don't believe is what she is actually seeking. She said, last year I came before the board and you kindly granted my request for additional personal days for religious observance. So you can't actually give her additional personal days. That's negotiated in your master agreement. What you gave her last year were approved unpaid leave days. So Claudia is actually asking this year for, it looks like, 4 unpaid leave days. Did you all get that letter in your board packet? So September, a March, and 2 May days.
So Lynn, it kind of begs the question, or reminds us that we never circled back to that part of the policy that, I was tasked with that, to kind of start thinking about unpaid leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID and life. And so here we are with, again, we don't write, I'm remembering this correctly from last year, right? So, so I'm looking at the Google Doc that I had started last year to work on unpaid time off requests, because we've had this issue of like, how do we grant them? And we don't really want to be the arbiters of what's a acceptable kind of ask and what isn't. And so we were talking about how it would be helpful to have something a little more kind of concrete and uniform across the board, but we don't have that formally yet.
Right.
I mean, and you know, it's interesting. I was kind of looking back at what I had worked on, and when I was working on it last year, I came up with 3 additional days of unpaid time off. You know, we were kind of going back and forth with how many days, and for anything, whether it's a religious observance, a cruise. I'm thinking of all the things people have come to us in the past, classes, weddings and stuff, and how we would. So I don't know if at some point we're going to want to circle back to that, because here we have someone asking for unpaid time off and a certain number of days that sets a precedent for the next person that wants also 4, if we're saying she can take 4.
I do think you may have some scenarios, because I'm just thinking of this, for example, if you have a teacher who's having a baby and their leave runs out on May 20th and the end of the year might be June 9th, right? So they might have a period of time that's greater than 3 or 4 days, but it just doesn't make sense, or it is a situation that they can't really control. So the alternative is what? If you don't approve the unpaid leave, it is they report to work or disciplinary action, right? That's the other part of it. So the fixed number, I think from my recollection, what we had talked about is if you had a certain number that could be approved without having to go to the board, but if it was something that was a longer term situation, that you might still have to take some of those. So maybe loosening the number by giving some sort of guidance there.
Right.
I thought we did work that into the contract, that it was like any 3 days unpaid. And then that was, didn't we address that?
I don't think we ever circled back to it and formally kind of put it in policy.
Oh.
You're thinking we're putting it under negotiations, Polly?
Yeah, I thought, because I remember having this conversation again about what do we decide is appropriate to take for unpaid leave. And we just decided that if you go through your sick time and your personal days, that 3 unpaid days seemed enough. I thought we did that.
Jamie, is that something that's in language in the support staff agreement or the teacher's master agreement?
No, not that I know of.
I feel like it might have been circling around and around with what Mary's talking about, Polly. That's how I'm remembering it.
Okay.
Rick and Kevin, are you remembering anything?
I don't think it got into the teachers. I don't remember support staff, but I kind of don't remember it being an issue on support staff.
I remember discussion, but I don't remember it being finalized.
So we just may at some point want to kind of circle back to that so that we have something. And I'm happy to share. I can share the Google Doc that I have. I just unearthed it, and we could kind of use that as a springboard for maybe making some strides to have something more concrete. And I guess that we can consider this particular ask. Obviously, we need to, independent of what we may, where we may land on this.
Is that something, Mary, that you think would be helpful to have another board member or 2 work with you on?
Well, I'm happy. I could share the Google Doc with the other board members and you, Lynn, and people can take a look at what I came up with. I mean, I worked off some of the materials that you had given me and some of the materials from other SUs and stuff. And this is, kind of where I landed. But it seems that in the immediate, we ought to, that's a loose thread that we should tie up at some point because we didn't circle back to it. And partially, I certainly dropped the ball on that too. So my apologies for my role in that. And, but it seems like we need to kind of consider Claudia's ask independent of kind of this because we're not quite there yet.
So before we go to Claudia, I just want to summarize in my designee. Are you wanting this to come back at the next SU board meeting? Or are you wanting to have it be kind of a subcommittee where maybe 2 or 3 of you, and I don't mind helping to take a look at what you have and try to get it closer to being something that is in more of a final form before you bring it back to the full board?
Yeah, that would probably be helpful. I mean, maybe Lynn, I could share it with you, and then maybe we just want there's one other person on the board who wants to cast eyes on it, and then we can kind of go back and forth between ourselves and then come back in October with something a little more concrete. If you feel like there are 1,000,001 really pressing things happening right now. I just brought it up because we didn't circle back to it, but whether it needs to rise to any degree of urgency, I don't really know. I'm happy to try to move forward with it, or we can punt it.
I wouldn't mind the date of November, I'll be honest.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, I don't feel like it's wildly urgent on the list of all the things that are urgent right now. This is not, even in the top 20, I don't think.
Is there anybody that wants to help with that?
You don't want to do it in your policy committee?
Well, we had talked about you guys taking a crack at it first. This is the one that I've brought to leadership team. I believe we've brought to policy, then I've brought it to you, and we have gone around and around and around and around, and we haven't landed on this is what we're gonna do. Because I think each group has looked at it and said, you should bring that to policy. And then that group looked at it and said, you should bring that to the board. And then I think you guys told me at one point, bring that back to policy. I think this has gone around. I would like it to get closer to what you're thinking before I bring it back to policy, because then we can put it into policy like language. But if you can give us
Okay. I will share that document with you, Lynn. And is there anyone else on the board who would like to cast eyes on it? Polly?
I can chime in for sure.
Okay, sweet. So we'll work on that a little bit, and then we'll look toward November or December to maybe get it a little closer to finalized. So Lynn, circling back then to Claudia's ask for the additional days. These are unpaid days, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How do folks feel about that?
I'm actually good
I
with
have
it.
no problem. Yeah, I have no problem. We've granted it to her,
Yeah.
I think, like the past 4 or 5 years that I've been on the board, so I have no issue with it.
Okay.
With that, I'll make a motion.
Okay, great. So the motion is to grant Claudia Woodward her 4 unpaid days for her religious observance. We'll take a roll call. Polly?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
So the other piece is under personnel. Jamie actually took care of in her director's report. The only other piece about the open positions we never filled, we budgeted for the early childhood director. I just wanted to remind you of that. That's something that because of the uncertainty of COVID, we didn't fill. And when we're talking about those logistics that Dawn has taken on for food service, that's definitely felt like a spot that I know Michelle and Jody and I have felt like, boy, we wish we had somebody in that spot, because there was not a lot of guidance, and then for a while it was fast and furious and a lot to handle. So I just want to plant that seed. I hope that we keep that in the budget for next year, and the intention would be to try to fill that position for next year. We feel like that's pretty key role that we're missing within the organization. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to bring you back a year when I did some goal setting, my goal setting for the superintendent role, and I wanted to just bring you back to that. So tell me how little this looks for you guys. You need me to make it bigger? How's that?
It's fine.
Whoops.
Yeah, it's fine, Lynn.
Too far.
Yeah, too big.
Okay. So what you see here is last year's goals. Just want to remind you, these were multi-year goals that I had set for myself in terms of the work plan for the year. So, well, for multiple years, but I think that it's important to go back and reflect each year and update and revise. So I'm gonna go over the goals this month, and then next month I'm gonna go over the reflection of the work plan piece with you. So I think this year clearly, right near the top, has got to continue to be manage the emergency response related to COVID through all phases of reopening, continue the daily and yearly work responsibilities that are outlined in statute under superintendent job responsibility. So we did not accomplish this. I didn't mean to take this out. So that should be, I'll remove that strike through. So we had talked about setting goals as a board in the spring, and we didn't get to that. Everything kind of went by the wayside as soon as COVID happened. So I would like us to circle back around to that at some point to make some board goals as well for moving forward. So last year, we definitely were focused on the transition to the partially consolidated governance structure. I feel like we've done a pretty fair job of coming together in a really practical, unified, collaborative way. So I am not personally thinking that we need to continue to work on that piece of the goal work. But I would love to hear from you if there's a part of what I'm saying that you feel like is absent or that I should consider in this. One of the pieces that we really tried to focus on pre-COVID, it went out the window once COVID happened, was supporting building principals in a way that minimized the amount of time that they were spending on attending to some of those functions that were not in the realm of instructional leadership. So we had several strategies that we put into place last year to try to capitalize on as much time as we could for them to focus on instructional leadership. It went, I think, pretty well in the start of the year, and then when COVID happened, like everything else, that there was no keeping the detail of that work away from the building leaders. That was just our reality, was focusing on that. I think continuing to focus on communication is a priority of mine. I think that's important, especially during the crisis, that we need to make sure that all of our stakeholders, from kids to parents to teachers, board, community, are all a part of and are getting multiple means of communication. I think that the budget analysis and support for the efficiencies and the opportunities within the SU and the member districts will be ongoing work. I don't see that work ending. I think that's going to be a constant lens for us as we continue to move forward. And then my work with the central office leadership team and the SU leadership team is pretty consistent. This actually should be blue. This was a new addition this year. So we keeping the same focus, the same priority areas, with the addition of equity work that we're doing within the organization. In terms of the negotiation piece, we did successfully merge the FNESU and the Sheldon Master Agreements. We will this year need to focus on the teacher negotiation piece. We have a 3-year contract, Morgan, with the support staff. I think it's 3. So we don't have to do that this year, but we will need to do
Yeah, correct.
Okay. We will have to do some administrator negotiations. So the rest is my work plan. And this is the piece that I haven't finished going through. I mean, I have, but honestly, it looks like that. It's not completely in here. So I'll be going through this and sending this to you. So you'll be able to see the artifacts in here about the progress that we've made in some of these pieces. There's an entirely new part of this. You can see some links are already put in, but just around the COVID response and some of the work that has to happen on a regular basis around the COVID response. So we'll go over that in more detail in October. I'm not ready for that piece of it yet. So for tonight, I really just wanted to focus on this piece here. So any reactions to these goals in terms of my focus for the work that I'm doing?
Looks good, I think. That's a lot.
Multi-year.
Yeah, Lynn, I think it's excellent. I mean, it's really thoughtful and, you know, it's a pretty comprehensive look at, I mean, you have to wear a lot of hats. And obviously, you know, the COVID has kind of risen and kind of, you know, sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room for sure.
Definitely. So if there's something that, you know, when you walk away from this and you think about, oh, I wonder if she's thought about that, or if there's a piece that's glaring to you, I'm certainly always open to feedback. So if there's something that you think about later, don't hesitate to reach back out, and we will have an opportunity to relook at this, like I said, in October. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So the next part of my agenda is around high quality staffing in teacher hiring. So we've been working for a couple of years now, looking at our data around teacher retention and looking at the surveys. I know, Kevin, it was important to you last year that I do exit surveys, and I couldn't make that happen this year. So I won't lose track of it. I do hope to have opportunities to have some of those in-person or virtual exit surveys at the end of this year. We do have we did send out surveys to all of the staff who left, the 40 staff members who left this year. So we have that data to look at. You'll get at October's meeting a look at that information, and Morgan's also going to give you the updated charts so that we can continue to look at the school by school level of, you know, what kind of attrition rates are we seeing in each of the buildings, and what's the experience level of the staff teaching in each of the buildings throughout the organization. So we've been focusing on that for a few years, and we had a few strategies that we put into place last year. So I just want to give you a couple updates on that. So we had the UVEI partnership, the Upper Valley Educator Institute partnership that we talked about last year. So we had a teacher licensure program and a principal licensure program that we introduced in the SU. And it was the worst timing ever. I think we had our first meeting the week before, or maybe it was the week after. It was during COVID. So we ended up, long story short, not having as many people excited about spending money on starting a program. And I think part of that is just the really poor timing and the economic uncertainty around COVID. There was definitely an interest, but there were people that just were not willing to take the risk with the funding piece of it. We did have one person, a teacher, actually we've hired her as a teacher, so she's in the teacher licensure program. She has a provisional license now and is working at Enosburg Elementary, so she'll be licensed at the end of the year through UVEI. And we have 2 other Enosburg staff members who are in the UVEI principal cohort. So we do have 3 people that we're growing into either teachers or leaders locally. So we'll continue to keep that as a priority. I do want to say Heather did quite a lot of work to prepare us for a competitive grant around that. And I think we reported that in the spring. We didn't get the grant. And I think that, you know, if it hadn't been for COVID, the initial feedback was there was strong interest in in the work that we were trying to accomplish. So we'll keep our eye on that. We're going to continue to think about our efforts for recruitment. And, you know, last year, part of our plan was I was sending Courtney off to career fairs, and all of those career fairs were planned right in that February, March, April timeframe. So none of those happened. So we will keep that in mind. We will continue to do the reach out through the handshake portal that was new to us last year to try to attract new teachers. And one of the strategies in some of the equity work that we've been doing is about where we're looking for new teachers. So I think we're going to expand the radius of where we're looking to attract new teachers from. So we might be, if there is a time where we can be in person going to career fairs again, it might be a little further from home to see if we can attract some people to come to Vermont. Any questions on any of that? So in terms of the reopening, we've just had local board meetings, and I feel like I've given both of the local boards a pretty good summary of reopening. I think that I'll just give you after week 1, what I'm hearing from people is that they're really glad we have small groups to start with. There's a lot to this, putting these protocols in place and practicing all of the new restrictions with small groups of kids certainly is feeling like a blessing. And we've had a few bumps, a few things that weren't considered, but all in all, I think that people are feeling pretty confident with the plan and feeling like the plan was as inclusive as it really could have been. So where we're finding where there are bumps, or we're finding where there are things that we hadn't thought of, we're quickly adapting and making sure that we're taking care of what we need to take care of. So there's still much work ahead as we continue to build the virtual academy options, and as we continue to plan for how we will manage when there's a positive test, and the communication planning around that. That's all the work that we're focused on right now, and have been focused on for a few weeks. So that's where we're at with reopening. Any questions on that?
Lynn, have you heard from any other superintendents across the state yet about how COVID numbers are looking? I know I saw an article in Vermont Digger this morning that there were 2 cases, I believe, in a Harwood Union, one of the Harwood Union schools, but I can't 100% recall.
Crosset Brook, if I remember right.
Yes, Crosset Brook Middle
Yeah.
School. And so I'm just curious if you all are kind of in contact with one another to see, okay, well, so here, you know, it's inevitable in some ways, even given the best of protections that are being employed. And so then it's like, okay, well, now what, and how are they responding, and how might we then kind of look at these other places if we, you know, and follow suit with our response if we were in a similar situation?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I spend a lot of time with other superintendents collaborating on exactly this kind of work. The superintendents I collaborate the most with are they're my regional partners, and that's the Champlain Valley superintendent group. And we're not in that region. So Bridget Neese is the superintendent of Harwood. I don't remember the name of the SD, but in that area. So she's in another regional group. We do sometimes have opportunities to meet as a whole state, although virtual collaboration is a little harder than if you're in a room and can just kind of circle around and check in with people. So what I will say is that it has been really clear to us that the decision to close if you have positives is going to be made with the Department of Health for the most part, because there's a couple of reasons why you might close if you have a positive test. So one is you might close because the Department of Health is saying to you, you've had a significant exposure, and you know, this number of people are now considered a close contact. You need to close that classroom, or you need to close that school. So that's going to be, I'm not going to say no to the Department of Health. If they tell me to do something like that, they're the experts, and then that's what I'm going to do. the reality is there might be other reasons. And I think this may be, without having spoken with Bridget, just reading what was written in that press release, is that we talked to you about where we are in terms of our staffing reality right now and our ability to run. If you pull 5 or 10 people out of the mix, will we still be able to run without those adults in the building? So that's the question that we have. The staffing level of our substitute pool is also pretty low at this point. So I could see 2 reasons why we would close if there was a positive case. One would be is if we were in consultation with the Department of Health. If they told us that we should close, we would close for a period of time. And also if we had an issue with the number of people that had to go out in quarantine, if we could not staff at an appropriate level, it would be another reason for us to close for a period of time and shift into remote. That's why it was so important for us to do the work to know how our system changes if we have to go into a more restricted period. So we should be able to go in much more quickly into a step 1 where kids are not in person. Any other questions on that? So the last thing I have, I'm sorry, there's 2 things. One of the last things I have is the equity work that's happening within FNESU. We have a teacher-driven equity, inclusivity, and diversity leadership team that has been developed in Franklin Northeast, and they have a year-long action plan in place, and they're doing some great work. We have a presenter. We received a grant last year, an equity literacy grant. Unfortunately, the grant funding ran out before we could use it because of COVID, because we had intended to use it in the spring and didn't get to use it until the fall, but we still went ahead with our plan and had a really phenomenal presenter present to all of the FNESU staff members. And the equity task force team is going to come to your next SU meeting, and they're going to give you a high-level overview of the work for the year. So I just wanted to give you a preview that was coming in your October meeting. So 3 teachers, 1 from Cold Hollow, 1 from Enosburg High School, and 1 from Richford High School will be, they're leading that task force, and they'll be the ones doing the presentation. And then the last thing is another share. I'm going to share my document one more time. In this, I think you saw something that looked like this last year, and I'll send you this after the meeting. So this was just what our plan is to focus on in the meetings for the remainder of the year. And if there's something that you feel like is missing from here that's not on here, feel free to let us know that, so you can kind of get a sense of what's coming in the future meetings. So we've planned it out for all of the SU meetings for the year, just getting a sense of when is the best time to be bringing you some of these overviews and reports. And the other thing that we're going to be leaning into, like in your UUSD meetings where you get your principals reports, the directors will start having reports, written reports as well for the SU meetings.
Is there any plan to meet in person anytime soon?
So that is up to you guys to figure out. The tricky part is you have open meeting laws, and you guys could come as board members in person to our schools, and we can do all of the screening. However, the public can't come because you can't have visitors. It's very strict in terms of the guidance. You cannot have visitors in your meetings. So some organizations have gone back to physically coming together and gathering for board meetings, but then they have to keep the doors locked and they have to open something remotely.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know if there was the timeline or if it was going to be like this for a long, long time.
I hope not. But the tricky part, Kevin, is just in the how do you manage the public access part of it. Right now, we can manage the public because they can pop into our meetings. If we shift, we're going to be, projecting and doing the public will have to figure out the sound piece so that when you're talking at the table, the people that are on the screen can adequately hear you. So we'd have to figure out, much like Northwest Access does, in terms of having the mics in the appropriate places. It's doable. If you direct us to figure it out, we will figure it out.
It's not that important to me. I was curious, that's all.
Anybody else?
Portrait of a grad.
Yeah. We're not done. It definitely took a back seat. I wish that we were in a better place right now than where we are. We have that. I have that in the November. Where is it? I actually have it in the December agenda list, Rick. I don't have another all SU in service with the teachers until late October, so I was hoping to do that before I bring it back to the board. I could bump it up to November if you felt like you needed to see that sooner. What do you think?
I'm fine with it being December, Lynn.
Rick, what about you?
Yeah, I think December. There's no difference really between December and November.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that we could get to it sooner, but we don't have the bandwidth right now to move that forward quite yet.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Lynn, you all set there? Okay. So let's see, a couple of the future agenda items. I guess we talked about Morgan with the food service component and maybe circling back to that, as well as the leave issue for November, portrait of grad for December. So we'll just kind of be mindful of that. And I had a couple of questions, Lynn. So I heard when Michelle was talking, she said that Nick doesn't have an office space and is holed up in a corner of the conference room. And he's only one of our new hires that's going to need office space, because we've also got the facilities manager that'll be coming in. I assume that person will need to be based out of the SU office. And we also have the person who's running basically a new school, our virtual academy, and that person needs office space. And that conference room is only so big, and you'd need to maintain kind of the social distance requirements at the same time. So I guess what I'm getting at is it seems like you all are running out of space for this kind of growing team.
Right. We've definitely been trying to maximize what we have for the space. So I would say that for those of you who haven't been to our central office, it's on 2 floors in the post office building in Richford. And we have the business office working downstairs. Right now, I can't have everybody back on the same days because I can't distance them enough in the spaces that they're in. One side of there are 2 open spaces in the downstairs office, and I've got 4 people on one side and 3 working on the other. So can't quite be far enough away there. Upstairs, Michelle's doing a great job of building the capacity, centralizing some of the services and building the capacity so that we have the right systems to support our kids. And we don't have to go out and contract those services as much. We still have to contract some services, but we're doing more internally than we've ever done before, which is, as we all know, much more efficient. But it's coming with a lot more staff having to work centrally for us. So we don't have spaces for most of Michelle's behavior team. So they're assigned in multiple schools, and we're hoping that they just can find some spaces to work in those buildings. But we can't bring them all in. We don't have enough space for them. In terms of the office spaces, I was asked last week, what are we going to do with the NMV facilities director? And Morgan was on the interview with me, and I just chuckled a little. I thought, I don't know, we'll figure something out. But we have a back office space where Robin is, and Robin, I think, has 4 or 5 other people that are sharing that space. We have another office space upstairs that has about 4 people working in it right now. So the best we can do right now is to break down the conference room and use that space. But we are definitely feeling the pinch of not only the space, but there's some parking that goes along with it as well, because we don't have enough parking spots.
Right. And that's
Well,
ongoing.
I was going to say, even before these positions were added, I think you were pretty maxed out, and this just tips it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say most people have been extremely flexible, but there are times where for confidential purposes, like I obviously have to leave my space and go into Michelle's office and make phone calls that way. If the evaluator is testing a student, or the school psychologist is in there writing a report, I'm being respectful of the confidential information. So, people have been great, and we're able to use a few of the more private spaces, but that definitely is a challenge. We make it work, but it does require going to another room to make phone calls at times and things like that. But, you do what you got to do to get through the day.
Yeah, so you guys all need to be in the same building?
What do you mean?
Well, could you rent another facility somewhere and put some employees in that?
I'm not saying that we couldn't do that. I would prefer not to. It's challenging right now with the 2 floors. I think COVID has made it a little easier in terms of communication, but having those separate office spaces creates an additional challenge in terms of the collaboration that's sometimes necessary. So I don't love the idea of taking part of our team and pushing them out somewhere else.
I didn't know if there was a part of that team that logistically could work in a different spot. I know that, the one I was thinking of was the financial. If you got all the people out there that were entering bills, doing that kind of stuff in the one building. I know you collaborate a lot with Morgan on a lot of things, so having him handy is certainly a bonus. But that was my first thought, would be to get all the financial people out of that building, because that tends to be separate, really a separate entity almost than what you're doing as far as the education stuff, as far as your collaborative stuff to some extent, it's all kind of together, but that would have been, or at least temporarily. The other thing is I have heard nothing about the armory. I don't know what's happening there. I don't know what's happening. I don't think that probably there's any more room in I can never remember the house next to the Cold Hollow Career Center, but I don't think there's probably a lot more square footage there than what you have now. In fact, there might be less. So
I think there's less.
So the armory it's in the process now for the town to take over ownership. It will be completed before December. There's some space in there clearly that's earmarked for certain things, but there is also space that is not. So that definitely could be a conversation.
So, and Lynn, I have a question just to back up, and then the current space too. There's ADA issues there as well, I'm assuming, right? Or is there an elevator to the upper floor? Because I remember when I was on crutches after my surgery, scooting up the stairs to come to one of the interviews.
We do. It's not actually. There's no elevator. I think that
Right.
in the past, I think I've heard. I haven't had this issue since I've been the superintendent. But when there've been people who haven't been able to go up the stairs, they've shifted down into they've switched with someone and gone downstairs for that time period. We have, because we also do trainings for our teachers there. We have the academy days. We have had some teachers with mobility issues, and we're sensitive to that. Our only group space is on the second floor. There's no space big enough on the first floor. So on those days where we have an academy group with someone with mobility issues, we've moved them into, we've closed the library for students for an afternoon and had the academy work out of one of the libraries.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sensitive to that ADA piece. I mean, it's that really concerns me, to
We
not
have
have.
a small space downstairs that we could use for meetings. The challenge is that the wheelchair access is through the post office. So it would only be hours that the post office is open that you could get in there with a wheelchair.
Right,
Certainly
right.
work for crutches.
So Lynn, so I mean, I know Polly and Rick mentioned the armory. Maybe it would behoove us all to kind of, between now and the October meeting, to kind of put out some feelers. And Morgan, one thing that comes to mind is if we could, I think this would be kind of your domain, to kind of task you all, you and Lynn, to kind of come up with, well, what does the ideal space, look like? And we've kind of touched on issues of ADA accessibility, parking for staff as well as visitors, and obviously kind of enough office space in the best of times, let alone in the COVID era. So where you're even needing to be further apart. And then I'd add that we have kind of a centrality issue as well, because now that we've merged, I think about how far it is for people from Sheldon in particular, when we do staff trainings and things, professional development based out of the central office. That's a really long way for people from Sheldon to travel to Richford. So you put all of those together, and it seems as though it might be good for us to kind of look at and put feelers out of what other spaces might look like, what the square footage and office needs are. How many parking spaces do you really need for every single employee, plus however many your average amount of visitors or stuff. And maybe we could kind of circle back to this in the October meeting with some ideas of what that might look like. How does that sound to everyone?
Yep, I can certainly help with that.
I'll add that to the October agenda.
And Polly, can you tell me a little bit, because I don't know too much about the armory space. I've never been in there. Can you tell me a little bit about what that space could looks like, and office space wise, what it could accommodate?
Well, spatial judgments are my issue. I'm not great with it, but I'm going to do the best I can. Basically, it is one giant room in the center with offices around the outside of this huge room. It's I'm not doing it justice. There's a large parking lot along the side, a parking lot along the back, And there's actually a space in the back that's grass that could also be parking. There is a storage outbuilding. It's all one floor. There's bathrooms, there's kitchen. Like I said, the town clerk, we're going to be moving the town clerk's office over there. There is a vault there that the town clerk would utilize. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much an open shell.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. Helps me kind of visualize it. All right. So yeah, we could circle back to this in October, and keep the conversation going.
I think that sounds good.
Okay. Anything else? Folks, are we good here?
I think we're good.
All right. Lynn, did you have anything further?
I don't actually.
Okay. All right, sweet.
I'll move to adjourn.
All right. Rick,
Aye.
Kevin,
Aye.
Polly,
Hi.
and Mary is an aye. Thank you all so much. Take good care, everyone.
Hey, Mary.